Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Prophets Isaiah chapter 7 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're going to dive right into one of the most intense, edge-of-your-seat moments in ancient history. This entire chapter is essentially a masterclass in what happens when a massive geopolitical crisis collides head-on with divine instruction. We are going to walk through this text verse by verse, keeping our focus strictly on the historical events, to truly grasp the absolute terror sweeping through the kingdom of Judah and exactly how God responds to it.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, context and the crisis. Second, meeting at the pool. Third, the Sign of Emmanuel. Fourth, the Assyrian razor. Fifth, key ideas and meanings. And finally, number 6, practical lessons and recap.
Now, to make sure we keep everything totally grounded and simple, we're going to be looking at this chapter exclusively through the lens of Pashat. If you're not familiar with that term, it just means the plain text meaning in its literal historical context. We aren't doing any deep esoteric interpretations today. We really want to put ourselves right there in the sandals of the ancient Israelites, living through this specific crisis, and read the text exactly how they would have understood it in that exact moment in history.
Part 1. Context and the crisis.
Okay, so let's set the stage and figure out exactly who the major players are in the first two verses. Without this foundation, nothing else is really going to make sense. So we have King Ahaz. He's the king of Judah, the southern kingdom, sitting in Jerusalem. And right now, he is facing an absolute nightmare. Two rival nations have teamed up to form a massive military confederacy against him. You have King Rezin of Aram, which is ancient Syria, teaming up with King Pekah of Israel, the northern kingdom, which the text frequently refers to as Ephraim. Verse 1 tells us they came all the way up to Jerusalem to wage war against it. Even though they couldn't immediately conquer it, having two combined armies camped basically right on your doorstep is a terrifying reality.
Just how terrified were they? Well, verse 2 gives us this incredibly vivid, tragic picture. Word hits the house of David that Aram and Ephraim have joined forces, and the 1917 JPS translation says this: "His heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the forest are moved with the wind." Just pause and visualize that for a second. Imagine a fierce, violent storm ripping through a forest, and every single tree is just violently shaking and bending under the sheer force of the wind. That is the exact state of panic in Jerusalem. King Ahaz and his citizens are literally trembling. They are staring down an alliance that completely outnumbers them, and they think it's the end.
Part 2. Meeting at the pool. So, moving into verse 3, God steps in. King Ahaz is in full panic mode, frantically trying to prepare Jerusalem for a long, brutal siege. God actually tells the prophet Isaiah to go intercept the king, and the location here is absolutely fascinating. God tells Isaiah to go to the highway of the fuller's field at the end of the conduit of the upper pool. Why the upper pool? Well, think about it. If an enemy army is about to surround your city walls, your number one concern is running out of water. Ahaz is out there urgently inspecting the city's water supply, trying to make sure his people don't die of thirst. And right there, right in the middle of his frantic military prepping, God sends Isaiah to deliver a message.
But God doesn't just send Isaiah. In verse 3, he tells Isaiah to bring his son along. Now, his son's name is Shear-Jashub. In the biblical era, prophets didn't just use their words to speak for God. Their actual lives, and especially the names of their children, were living, walking prophecies. The name Shear-Jashub literally translates to "a remnant shall return." So simply by showing up with his boy and calling his name, Isaiah is making a huge theological statement to the king. He's saying, look, judgment and devastation are absolutely coming, but don't lose all hope. A remnant of our people will survive this.
Then in verse 4, Isaiah delivers the direct instruction from God, and it is pretty surprising. He tells him, "Keep calm and be quiet, fear not." He tells him not to let his heart be faint over these two attacking kings. And look at how God describes them. Ahaz is looking out and seeing a raging forest fire coming to burn down his entire kingdom. But God calls them the tales of smoking firebrands. It's such a brilliant contrast. Think of a piece of wood you just pulled out of a campfire. It's smoking like crazy. It looks alarming. But the actual fire, the danger, it's completely burned out. That's how God views Rezin and Pekah. He's telling Ahaz to stop shaking like a leaf because the anger of these kings has zero power over God's ultimate plan.
Verses 5 and 6 let us in on the enemy's actual battle strategy. Aram and Ephraim have a three-step plan to take down Jerusalem. First, go up against Judah and vex it, basically terrorize the population. Second, make a breach, which means smash through those fortified stone walls. And third, they want to completely end the royal line of King David. They plan to set up their own guy, the son of Tabeel, as a puppet king who will just take orders from them. It's a solid, scary political plot, but in verse 7, God totally shuts it down with absolute authority. He just says, "It shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass." End of story. Human political scheming just cannot override the decree of God.
And instead of Judah being the one to fall, God flips the script completely in verse 8. He delivers this stunning prophecy that the northern kingdom of Ephraim, the very people attacking them, will be entirely broken within 65 years. They won't even be a people anymore. Then in verse 9, God lays down the ultimate challenge for King Ahaz. He says, "If ye will not have faith, surely ye shall not be established." This is the core test. Ahaz thinks his survival depends on his water conduits at the upper pool and his military walls. But God is making it crystal clear. Your kingdom's survival depends entirely on whether or not you actually trust my promise.
Part 3. The Sign of Emmanuel.
So we hit this huge pivotal moment in verse 10. The Lord speaks to Ahaz again, and God genuinely wants Ahaz to believe this promise. So in verse 11, God practically hands him a blank check. He says, "Ask for a sign from the Lord your God. Make it as deep as the depths or as high as the heights." God is willing to do a massive, undeniable miracle right then and there to prove he will protect Jerusalem. And what does Ahaz do? In verse 12, he refuses. He says, "I will not ask, neither will I try the Lord." Now on the surface, that sounds super religious and pious, right? But Isaiah sees right through the fake piety. In verse 13, an exasperated Isaiah says, "Is it a small thing for you to weary men, that you will weary my God also?" Ahaz doesn't want a sign because he doesn't actually want to rely on God. Historically, we know Ahaz was already working on a backdoor political deal to hire the massive Assyrian empire to come save him. He's choosing human politics over divine protection.
Because Ahaz is being so stubborn and wearing God out, the Lord says, "Fine, if you won't pick a sign, I will give you one myself." And this brings us to verse 14, which is incredibly famous. "Behold, the young woman shall conceive, and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." Staying strictly within the historical Peshat context here, God is pointing to a young woman present in their timeline. She's going to have a baby boy. And this specific child is going to act as a living, breathing timeline and a physical guarantee for King Ahaz during this specific war.
Just like Isaiah's son, Shear-Jashub, had a highly symbolic name, this new baby's name carries a massive message. Emmanuel literally translates to "God is with us." This is the ultimate proof of divine presence during their crisis. Think about the psychological impact of this. Every single time Ahaz, or anyone in the panic-stricken city of Jerusalem, hears a mother calling out Emmanuel to her kid in the street, they are forcefully reminded, God is with us right now. We do not need to fear the armies of Aram and Ephraim.
And the sign isn't just the name, it's also a highly specific timeline. Verses 15 and 16 tell us that this child will eat curds and honey, which in the ancient Near East was the typical diet of a land that had lost its agriculture and was reduced to just basic pastoral grazing. But the really critical part for Ahaz is the ticking clock. Verse 16 explicitly says that before this boy is even old enough to know how to refuse evil and choose good, so basically before he's a toddler making basic moral choices, the land of those two terrifying enemy kings will be completely forsaken. It's a countdown. In just a couple of short years, the threat will be gone. God gave Ahaz every tangible reason in the world to just calm down and have faith.
Part 4. The Assyrian Razor. But starting in verse 17, the whole narrative takes a very dark turn. Ahaz refused to trust God. He wanted to rely on his own foreign alliances. So the prophecy shifts. It's no longer just about the destruction of his enemies. It's now about the heavy judgment falling on Judah itself. God says he's going to bring days upon Ahaz that haven't been seen since the kingdom split apart. Verses 18 and 19 use this wild, intense imagery. God says he will hiss for the fly of Egypt and for the bee of Assyria. God is literally whistling for the greatest, most terrifying superpowers on earth as if they are just annoying little insects. And they are going to swarm in and settle over all the steep valleys and rocky cliffs of Judah. The land is going to be completely overrun.
And verse 20 hits with the most profound, crushing irony. Remember how Ahaz was secretly scheming to hire the king of Assyria to be his savior? Well, God flips that entirely. The text says, "In that day shall the Lord shave with a razor that is hired, even with the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet, and it shall also sweep away the beard." In the ancient world, violently shaving a man's beard off was the absolute ultimate sign of humiliation and total defeat. Ahaz thought he was hiring Assyria for protection, but God says, "No, I am the one hiring Assyria, and I'm using them as a razor to completely strip your kingdom bare." And the rest of the chapter, down through verse 25, paints a very bleak aftermath.
The once great agricultural society of Judah is going to turn into a massive, uncultivated wilderness of briars and thorns. The survivors will be hunting with bows and arrows just to get by, living off a single cow and a couple of sheep.
Part 5. Key Ideas and Meanings.
So having walked through this history step by step, let's step back and look at the core anchors holding this whole chapter together. Really, it comes down to these two young boys and their highly prophetic names. Shear-Jashub, meaning a remnant shall return, and Emmanuel, meaning God is with us. These weren't just abstract ideas. They were living kids walking around Jerusalem. They prove that God, not the human kings with their swords and shields, dictates the actual timeline of history. The message was clear. Judgment is heavy, and things are going to get incredibly difficult. But the nation will survive, and God's presence is right here with you through the crisis. You don't need to hire an Assyrian razor if you just trust that God is with us.
Part 6. Practical Lessons and Recap.
We've seen the history, but what do we actually take away from this? The ancient text acts as a powerful mirror for our own modern choices. First off, look at Isaiah's advice at the pool. Keep calm. When a crisis hits, it is so easy for our hearts to shake like trees in a hurricane. But panic almost always leads to terrible, destructive decisions. We have to learn to quiet our fear. Second, we have that incredible warning from verse 9. If ye will not have faith, surely ye shall not be established. You absolutely cannot fake your way through faith. Ahaz tried to sound pious while secretly plotting a political fix, and it backfired disastrously. True stability only comes from genuine trust. And that leads to the final point. Don't rush to purely human, worldly solutions to try and solve divine tests. Relying on the Assyrians of the world will only end up bringing the razor to your own door.
So when the storms of life start blowing, and your world feels like it's shaking, what are you going to do? Are you going to scramble for your own political razors? Or are you going to stop, keep calm, and trust that God is with us? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.